Hi, I'm James, and today I'm going to talk to you about using the OPC step components for drum tracks, and I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible and talk to you about what I think you should learn to get kind of the most out of your efforts that you put into the OPC. So there's a ton of these components, or step components, and you might be tempted to start over here, but I actually suggest that you start with this one right here. This is trigger spark, and this basically tells you how many times or when a note is going to play. It's independent of a lot of the other types of step components that you can add, and it gives you a lot of variety, and it's probably the most common one that you'll use for something like drum tracks. So to start off with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up my kick track. Let's do that kick. You got the classic double trigger. Great. Anyway, so what I'll do here is I just have a basic 4 on the floor kind of pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this fourth one. And I'm going to make it trigger. I'm going to keep pressing 4. It's going to trigger the first 3 out of every 4 times. And I can tell that because the flashing ones are when it's going to play. And then the lit up one that's not flashing is when it won't play. So like this is 4, but not 1, 2, 3. 1, but not 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, but not 4. And that's what I'm going to stick with. You'll notice I put this step just before it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this one's only going to happen on the 4th. So let's hear what that sounds like. I mean, it's just going to be a kick drum. So on this next pass, it's going to be a little different. So nothing groundbreaking, right? But I just wanted to at least say that's how you might use trigger sparks for this. You can make things more interesting than that. You can add a ton of them, but I suggest just taking a while and getting really comfortable with that. So I'm actually going to move right along to the hi-hat track. And what I'll do here is I'm going to find, let's try that plug. Yeah. And what I'm going to do, just kind of make a point, is they're all going to be, there's going to be a bunch of them here. And what I will do is I'm going to make it so that everyone that's in the position of like an 8th note, or halfway between the, okay, I guess I'll just say, I'm not going to do that counting. All right, those notes, I'll just say I'm going to kind of emphasize them. And the way I'm going to do that is I've selected all the other notes, and I'm going to use velocity here. 5 is a default value for whatever reason for velocity, and it does nothing. And so I'm actually just going to bring it down 1. So these are all going to be a little quieter. So let's hear what that sounds like. It's subtle, but you can hear it, right? What I'll do, I'm going to add just a couple more things here. I'm going to add tonality, and what I'll do is I'll just put that on the 1, the 5, the 9, and the 13. So the first 16th note of each beat. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a tonality component, and what this does is it changes the note. These are kind of more for the synth tracks because they make a lot bigger changes. 6 and 7 only change it by a semitone, which is something you won't want to do on a synth track most of the time, but works really well with drum tracks because usually there's similar sounds right next to each other. So let's see what happens if we make the first 16th note of each quarter note a half step up. Let's see what that sounds like. Well, what is it? So I couldn't tell the difference on that. I don't know if somebody else could tell the difference on that. So I'm actually going to go back here and say, what if we instead do that? So you can hear it a little bit better. It doesn't sound great, but my point is more just that you can do a lot to vary just one note. This is just the same note the whole time. What I'll do now is, ahead of where I plan on putting the snare, I'm going to have the snare on 2 and 4. I'll just add a multiply. So let's hear that. Okay, so that happens a bit too often. So right now, I've kind of gone over, just as a recap, I've gone over using trigger sparks. I've gone over using tonality, velocity, and multiply, because I just added those multiply steps. And now I want to talk about how that's going to get annoying, right? That double trigger or that re-trigger each time beforehand. So what I'll do is I'm actually going to go to those spots. And even though this is also going to affect the multiply part, I'm going to add a component spark. So this works a lot like the trigger sparks. It says, okay, the first pass, don't apply any of the step components. The second pass, do apply them. So I'm going to have it do it the first, but not the second. Let's just kind of hear what that, let's hear what that sounds like. And so that means that the second part's a bit more chill. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add some trigger sparks that apply to trigger sparks. That way these only play that first time that's more chaotic, and then they actually drop out completely. Every other one drops out completely. I realize what I've just done also, though, is I didn't mean to add one there. So let's check it out. So you can hear all of these, just kind of these spark components really help you compose. And it may seem like I'm kind of arbitrarily doing these, and that is true right now, but once you get the hang of this, it becomes easy to think in terms like, oh, okay, I want to really emphasize these beats, so I'll put, lower the velocity on other ones or increase the velocity on those. So now I've gone over basically everything I wanted to talk about aside from the jump component. Well, first I'm going to add in I'm going to add in that on the 2 and the 4. And what I'll even add in 2 is I'll add those every 4th time. And I'll actually just go ahead and add a multiply to that every 8th time. We're not going to wait that whole time, but so kind of neat, right? Like it's a way of including a fill without having to extend the pattern or press a fill button or something like that. So you heard it on that 8th time, it had that multiply retrigger. So last thing I want to talk about is the hi-hat track. We're going to go back here, and what you probably noticed is that it's just a 4-step pattern, basically, right? There's a little bit of variation over here, so I'm actually just going to remove those. And what I'll do is I'm going to use one of my favorite components, which is jump. And now jump is tricky, but just to show what I do, I'm going to have it jump to 1 from there, and I'm going to have it do that the first 5 out of 6 times. So it's going to play basically 3 full bars, because this is now half the length, and then it's going to move on. And so to make sure that this plays a full bar afterward, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say on the first but not the second time, jump to the 3rd. So let's just do that. Why not? Let's see what that sounds like. So it's going to play through this for 3 measures and this for the 4th. So not great, but if you were doing that in a more intentional way, it would sound pretty good. So my point here is more just that there's a lot that you can do here. So you can have these A-B patterns. You can split it up into 4. There's a wide variety that you can do, and especially because these trigger sparks and these component sparks can help you add variety even within a 4-note phrase. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility on the OPZ. So hopefully that made some sense. I know I went a bit fast, but this is also probably like take 12 because I keep having issues. So I'm completely new to this. So please let me know if you have any questions. And next up, I will talk about some of the synth tracks. But hopefully this was helpful. And remember to memorize these keys. And just as one final wrap up, I'll say, remember, multiply, velocity, tonality sometimes, trigger spark, component spark. You can basically ignore the rest for the drum tracks, and especially when you're first starting out. Like I said, jump is really cool, but I had a lot of patterns ruined when I would get really frustrated with the jump function and everything else was fine. So I suggest kind of getting a hang of that later. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.